Jonathan Pageau, Jordan Peterson, and Bret Weinstein had a conversation in 2017 about metaphorical truths and literal truths.
I argued for something I call metaphorical truth, that something can be literally false, but it can contain wisdom, and the way you know is that if you act as if it were true, you come out ahead of where you would if you act according to the fact that it's false. I then said that scientific truth is the top truth in the hierarchy.
On Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson and Bret Weinstein kind of did a little more of that.
We tend to think of intellect as having evolved because knowing what's true gives you an advantage. But there's actually nothing that says that the literal truth is where advantage lies. I have a category that I call literally false, metaphorically true. These are ideas that aren't true in the factual sense, but they are true enough that if you behave as if they were true, you come out ahead of where you would be if you behaved according to the fact that they're not true.
Pageau wanted to stress the point that as soon as you put one thing above another in value, you basically step into metaphorical, religious, hierarchical language. In a sense, you're making a brute selection of which facts to value and which facts not to value.
You said that factual truth is higher than metaphorical truth, but then to say that there's a top-level truth or that there's an overarching truth is to use a metaphorical structure to demonstrate where you're placing your truth. You have to resort to metaphorical truth to speak of hierarchy, because all the language of hierarchy is metaphorical.
It's a good discussion and worth watching. It's one of the rare times where Peterson doesn't get the last word.
Hard for me to understand why we could possibly be disagreeing over this. My point is, you have 1,000 different belief systems. They're all built out of metaphorical truths and a certain amount of real truth. Let's just stick science in with the rest of them. It's belief system 1001. Okay, now let's say, well, which of these is best? There's only one of them that has a distinct characteristic. It's number 1001. What's its distinct characteristic? It explains why all the others work. How is it not, just by virtue of the fact that it does something that nothing else can, how is it not the top one in the hierarchy?
Also, because the discussion was friendly, Peterson didn't have to finish on some big emotional rise.
And that's that!
Peterson actually enjoys the company of Weinstein and Pageau. So, knowing friends, and knowing how friends can argue, I bet the three probably did continue the conversation later on. Ultimately, there was a problem, a mixed use of terms. Weinstein openly agreed that he was using value judgments outside the scientific facts.
I will plead guilty to using metaphor to defend my position because, of course, language is composed of metaphors, both living and dead, and it's really hard to communicate anything without running afoul of that standard. In spite of that guilt, I will defend the idea that scientific truth is the top truth in the hierarchy, and the reason is really simple. There is no mechanism for sorting between metaphorical truths that belong to different traditions and are in conflict with each other.
I think I've found another way to move the conversation and the problem into cleaner language, some shared terms if nothing else. And this comes from Peterson.
Okay, so I'm going to get into this now.
Peterson has this article, Peacemaking Among Higher Order Primates. According to Peterson, the peacemaker sees new facts, redemptive facts, and allows them to imbue him with life. We can extend this to the community. The community uses shared facts as though they are tools and rules to imbue an environment with peace and order, so that people can potentially agree to play the community game. So keep that in mind. That's going to be important. Now, shared facts don't line up perfectly with Weinstein's metaphorical truths or literal truths, really. But the phrase shared facts offers us, the audience, a useful direction to talk about verifiability. This is the unique thing about Weinstein's scientific method, and I think this is his point. If we were to compare religious truths to, say, truths that come out of a theoretical or critical studies methodology, or methodological scientific truths, science approaches verifiability in a unique way, and it's this step of verifying that needs to be better understood.
Verifiable that makes predictions.
For this video, I'm going to look at 3 different methods for verifying something as a fact or a shared fact. 3 types of verifiability. In the Q&A, the 3 talk a bit about being a good person. Why be a good person?
Behave well. When you die, you go to heaven. That's cool. You should do that. On the other hand, if you behave well in a Brahman-Atman system, you may be reincarnated as something better than you are now. That's also cool, but it's not the same truth.
In religious communities, that becomes something like, be a good person, reach a better spiritual state of being. Heaven, reincarnated up instead of down. In a sense, these are morally equivalent, they're spiritually equivalent, they're metaphorically equivalent.
Those two things are the same, okay, in terms of their effect. They are restating of the hierarchy.
That's all good. But this is the time to bring in the phrase shared facts. For the community that shares a belief in heaven, for example, the statement, be a good person, go to heaven, can be considered a shared fact. Now, they don't talk about this next example, but I'm going to add something here. Let's turn the grouping to something like a theoretical or critical studies community. Now, the statement, become a good person, reach a better cultural or economic state of being, status, property, liberty, equality, these things become important. For the community that shares a belief in the theoretical or critical framework, the statement, be a good person, reach a successful status, or make a successful community, can be considered a shared fact.
If you behave so as to be reincarnated as something better or to go to heaven, what it will do is, in all probability, it will leave your descendants really well positioned in their culture.
Back to the examples from the Q&A. Why be a good person? Weinstein's example turns the language to science. Be a good person, reach a better biological or reproductive state of being, social integration, offspring, whatever. For the community that shares a common ground in the methods of science, the statement, be a good person, produce healthier offspring that are accepted by the group. That can be considered a shared fact.
And that means that your genes, which you might not have been in a position to say anything about, will be well positioned to persist and spread.
Is the problem using the term true when sometimes you should use the term fact? Isn't the issue using the word truth? Because we can say, we could use tradition and wisdom, and we're okay. But as soon as we start saying truth, then we run into problems.
This is why I want to move away from the phrases metaphorical truth and literal truth, and instead into a term like verifiability and a phrase like shared fact. These three be a good person examples involve very different communities using very different sets of shared facts. Now, a quick refresher of something from Bernard Lonergan, his generalized empirical method. For Lonergan, the process of inquiry involved several steps, and each step had a particular and separate mental job or process. Here are the steps: experiencing, understanding, verifying, responding. Experiencing involves attending to something, being in the moment and aware.
You benefit from being particularly aware.
Understanding covers the first questions of an inquiry, like who, what, when, where, why, how.
Those who are,
What perspective?
when certain civilizations.
But where do you stand now?
Why the postmodernists?
How are you guys?
From this, you can form a narrative or recognize a pattern from what you have experienced, and you can draw an insight. Next separate step in the process is verifying. Verifying can take different forms, but the mental activity here centers around answering a question like, is it so? This is very different from questions like who or what or when or where or why or how. We aren't satisfied with just the insight, with just the pattern. We want some assurance that the pattern is actually real or matching to something beyond the sense impression. After all, something can be perfectly intelligible, perfectly sensible, but be completely made up. So we use a different mental activity to verify. Then comes responding. After the verification of something as true, or I should probably say as a shareable fact, the questions become something like, what do I do? Getting back to the verification, because verification involves a separate mental activity, the processes used can include testing, confirming, or disconfirming the insights that came from experiencing and understanding. So, what does it actually mean to verify something? And what makes a verification actually authentic or inauthentic? What are some different ways to ask and answer this unique question? Is this so? I compared 3 be a good person statements earlier. We can now use them to illustrate 3 different popular types of verification. I'm playing with some words here for some creativity and some repetition. They are pure revelation, which often involves narrative or proclamation statements. Peer review, which can use hypothesis, theory, and jargon. And then peer replication, which involves data, variables, repeatability. If we bring these three types of verifiability into Lonergan's generalized empirical method, we can compare them and compare what kind of responses they might inspire in different communities. So, if peer revelation uses narrative and proclamation, then the shared fact is verified through emotional salience, personal identification, accepted authorities. This can lead to a spiritual or religious identification and responsibility. If peer review uses theory, then the shared fact is verified through the use of framed terms, comprehensive pattern recognition, and theoretical description. This can lead to an ideological identification and responsibility. If peer replication uses data and variables and repeatability, then the shared fact is verified through predictability and evidence-based explanations. This can lead to an empirical or scientific responsibility, or at least we hope it might. Now, a question for you. Can different types of verifiability be integrated? Is there such a thing as a multi-method approach to verifying something as a shared fact? I think it's possible, and I think that's what we're working on. Pageau, Peterson, and Weinstein, they're finding a way to share facts.
I'm in agreement with you on that.
I'm not trying to trap you. I know this is a crazily complicated problem.
Maybe the missing part of their vocabulary has nothing to do with metaphorical truths or literal truths. Instead, the challenge I want to put to them is the challenge of verifiability and integrating types of verifiability in order to find shared facts.
Religion is all about the hierarchy. That's what religion is about. The hierarchy itself is the capacity to be above quantitative considerations and to apply qualitative thinking. And the whole language of hierarchy is all a language about a movement from quantity up to quality. So you have to have a manner by which you focus on something.
So just to drive home this message, facts are not mere sense impressions. Facts are not just about seeing a pattern. You can spot or follow a pattern without it being a reality. There is something about a fact that is verified, something that has faced the challenge of the question, is it so? Different types of verification are used in different inquiries. How do you integrate them? I brought up the idea of shared facts early in this because the peacemaker finds those shared facts. Science may bring incredible explanatory power. Does it bring shared facts? If science has something unique, could it be in this type of verifiability? And does science then hold people to a different type of verifiability?
That science has an advantage when it comes to comparison that ethical systems don't.
Something worth thinking about is the stress on shared facts and not on shared values. People may still pursue their own aims, their own goals, but at least they might share the rules of the game the community is playing. If facts are shared or shareable, then does science have some kind of role as a peacemaker? Well, you tell me. I hope this helps us find something to share. Cheers.
It's real simple. Just don't go near the porcupine. Teach the kid to not go near the porcupine. You're dealing with some simian sort of complex geometry that's really just designed to keep your body moving and keep you alive and spread your genetics so that you can eventually evolve to the point when you're a god.